What is up, guys? Hello and welcome. This is Neldrin, and today, let's discuss how to consistently win your PvP. But before that, instead of our usual question of the day, if you haven't watched my PvP guide that I published some months ago, go check it. Most of the concepts of PvP are there, like what you need to avoid and which ships are great. Except that, there are now few points that are already outdated, which I will discuss here. Make sure to watch until the end because I will be mentioning some tips that wasn't mentioned from my previous video. I'm playing for more than a year now with a PvP win rate of almost 93% and consistently at rank more or less 100. Take note that I don't have some of the PvP meta ships. My previous PvP rank was around 175 after my last attempt of the season.
So, credibility established.
Since PvP is the only way for you to farm the merit points, you want to maximize it by winning most of your games and getting the promotion bonuses. If you are just starting out, just take this opportunity to level up your ships. Let's have a quick recap first of the carrier updates for the returning players. Together with the Operation Siren patch, we also got the carrier update. This update includes the carrier detection system, wherein carriers and light carriers are considered hidden until it is detected by enemy aircraft, approached by enemy ships, or affected by burn. Hidden carriers can still be damaged by collateral damage, or in other words stray salvos and torpedoes. With these changes, how does it affect PvP? First and the most impactful change is that your battleships cannot target enemy carriers immediately unless they are detected by what I mentioned earlier.
This changes everything.
Probably some of you experienced that if both vanguards are down, your battleship is alive, and your opponent has an undetected carrier. Your battleship will just sit there and do nothing. Even when your salvos are ready, she will not fire it. Unlike before that you can just slap 3 battleships in your fleet and you are good to go. Now, your fleet for PvP should be more well-rounded, or you need to adjust depending on the composition of your defending opponent. Because of the set update, many people think that carriers are viable now, which I also agree. But I don't think that you should slap 3 carriers on your PvP fleet. Well, unless you got Shinana, or you have ways of preventing your opponent from detecting your carriers. As mentioned earlier, carriers have advantages against battleships. However, they can be countered. For me, PvP is more flexible now in terms of fleet composition, since you can have different ships on your fleet, on how you will approach your opponent. The most obvious approach is to bring ships with high anti-air stat like Sandy, Juno, Helena, or Isuzu, which are all accessible. The most dependable among them are Sandy and Juno. I'll discuss more later on when I share my attack fleet composition. Another counter to the carriers is by using Warspite. Most carriers have medium armor, and Warspite's red skill is AP Shell, which has an excellent multiplier against the said armor type. It is best if you have Perseus, so that you can detect the carriers at the start of battle. But even without her, as long as you can detect the enemy, the second activation and the succeeding ones will still delete your enemy carriers. Take note that both Sandy and Warspite should be retrofitted to be more efficient at countering the carriers. Since their retrofit item can be bought from the prototype shop, retrofitting them shouldn't be an issue anymore. Another way to counter the carriers is by also bringing carriers too. My recommended carriers are Centaur, Saratoga, Hiryu, Enterprise, and Shinano. Centaur for the anti-air because of her fighter slots. Saratoga for the double dive bombers that can burst enemy vanguards. Enterprise for the double damage, plus invulnerability. But take note that her skill has 70% activation. Because of this, there is a small chance that you might restart your battle if it didn't trigger, and it might cause you to lose the battle. Hiryu is probably the weakest in my recommendations. The invulnerability is good, but if she is always the last ship floating, she won't really do much compared to Enti. And lastly, Shinano, other than being a rainbow rarity, she can debuff your enemy ship, plus that butterfly barrage. You are probably thinking that I missed the Fox sisters. For me, they are two of the most popular, yet inconsistent in performance here. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they are weak in PvP, but based on my experience fighting against them, whenever I can withstand their early airstrike, I have high chances of winning. There are common fleet compositions in PvP, and here's how to approach them so that you can secure those Ws. First is the mean fleet. This is the easiest fleet to challenge since the composition is not problematic at all because they don't follow any kind of team synergy. Either the defending fleet is too weak or follow a common theme, like all pink hair, armpit gang, Ark Royal and Lolas, and many more. Next is the most common. 2 carriers plus a battleship as their flagship. To counter this, you can bring your Warspite, Sandy and Juno. On rare occasions, if the enemy has tankier front lines, I will use Saratoga and Centaur to counter them. Next common fleet composition is 1 carrier with 2 battleships. In some cases, it will have Warspite in it. I usually place my Warspite on her opposite position to challenge it. Since I have Monarch, I'm confident to defeat it first. Once the opponent's backline is decimated, their vanguard will be easy to deal with. On both compositions mentioned, if they have Enterprise or Hiryu, I'll position my Warspite to not targeting them. The reason is, if they activate their invulnerability, my Warspite's damage might be wasted. They are easier to deal with if they are the remaining ship alive. Next fleet composition I usually see is the French fleet. It comprises 3 battleships. For this, I'll change Sandy into Rune. For my backline, sometimes I will run triple battleships too. But if the opponent's vanguard is too tanky, I'll use Saratoga and Centaur since their AoE damage is superb. Lastly, if the fleet is composed of any of 4 of the following, and the combat power is around 13k or above, I'll try to battle them. If I almost lose 3 times, then this will be the time to look for a new opponent. I want to share my fleet composition that constantly gives me the Ws, and maintains my rankings at around 100. First, I have Monarch as my flagship. With her skill barrage dealing AP damage, this is good especially against carriers and battleships. She also has a little bit of sustain. Next is Warspite. As mentioned earlier, her position depends on which I want to prioritize attacking first. Then Perseus. As mentioned earlier, I used her to detect the enemy's carrier at the start so that my Warspite can target them immediately. One downside of using her is that her damage is weaker due to terrible loading time, and her red skill's airstrike can be easily shot down. In most cases that I'm dealing with Hiryu or Enterprise, I'll change her into either Saratoga or Centaur. Because the preloaded airstrike to detect the carrier is useless anyway, since I will be avoiding them at the start. For my vanguard, I use Juno as my frontline so that I can activate her heal immediately. If my opponent can burst her at the beginning of the match, I will move her in the middle. Also, don't forget her anti-air. Next is Yuki Kaze. She's a bit tanky, because of her blue skill plus the heal she can provide to your backline. I gave her a fast-firing rate gun to maximize her all-out assault, which also fires torpedoes. For my last slot, this will be Sandy since most opponents are carriers. I only replace her when the opponent is running a triple battleship backline. On rare occasions, I'm using Shapayev if the enemy's destroyers are a bit problematic. 90% of the time this is my fleet composition. Depending on the situation, I might use the alternatives I mentioned. To maximize your climb at the leaderboards, make sure you are challenging players that are ranked above you. They'll give higher score points, which will lead you to higher ranks. And my last tip that I can offer. If you want to consistently get the promotion bonus, I suggest to play PvP as soon as the battle attempts refresh. The idea here is that you want to get points as early as possible, so that you can rank up immediately. Probably my explanation is not really good here, but check the visual representation I provided. Take note that this is based on my personal experience for some months now. To summarize, carriers are now viable in PvP, which makes the fleet building more dynamic. Adjust your attacking fleet based on the opponent's composition. And win more games against higher rank opponents to maximize the merit points gained. I hope that this guide will give you more wins in PvP, and get as many merit points as possible. If you want to share your PvP fleet that gives you a high amount of win rate, feel free to post it in the comments section. And don't forget to smack the subscribe button to help support my channel. You guys are awesome, and see you next time.